Welcome back for part 2 of the Hafco 12-inch bandsaw upper guides replacement. Well, in the first instalment we got our parts organised and we got an incorrectly supplied component and a few defects. First thing was the shaft was too short and obviously drilled on an angle, and that would cause the blade guides to be on an angle with respect to the blade, and that would cause drift. So the correct replacements were supplied, and it came with a problem. Connecting shaft, again, not square in the support block, and this would cause the blade guides to hang droop down. So we had a chat with Dad, and he did some machining, and we'll pick up this instalment with a bit of a discussion about whether I use the first version that's been repaired or the second version. Moving forward on the blade guides, we've got the blade guides back from Dad's place after a little bit of machining. These support blocks that go on the bottom of the extrusion had poorly drilled holes in the original manufacturing, and this one in this particular case was this hole here was bored crooked, and the original shaft would sit crooked. I'll flash up a photo of that. So we've got a new shaft, the hole's been bored out larger, new shaft's been turned up out of brass and down to the original 10mm, but I think this is 11.5mm hole roughly. Doesn't matter, it just needs to work. And that now has the shaft in the right position in relation to this surface here. Actually, it's this surface that I think sets the whole set of the of the blades being parallel, of the guides being parallel to the blades. So that's this one. This is a longer shaft than was originally supplied, which allows the blade guides to come out to the right place. This is the current model support block, and this connecting shaft here is the same length, which is fine. It's also had the hole bored out. In this case, the hole was bored crooked in this axis, so the blade guides were hanging down. I've got a photo of that to show. I had been in touch with the suppliers, and that's why I've got two. So originally they sent this part, which was incorrect for the machine, in that A, it was crooked and in that axis, and B, the shaft wasn't long enough to bring the blade guards out far enough to properly engage with the blade. So this shaft with this new version that was created, we're 10mm longer roughly, if I remember correctly instructions to Dad. And so that's the one that was sent. Of course, the new machines have this blade guide support block, which has the allocation or the space here for the bar that supports a circle cutting jig, which is not a bad feature. The other thing that's different here is the alignment. So this section here that sits into the extrusion is actually, on this one, is a little bit further over, and in fact it doesn't let the blade guide sit in exactly the right spot. I think what I will do is I'll use this one first, as it has the blade guide sitting right where I need it. Yeah, that's loose, so let's get that out. This has the blade guide sitting right where I need it in terms of the alignment that I believe I need for the relativity between this shaft and where the blade actually is. And you see when I put this one on, it's just a little bit out. It just doesn't quite sit. In fact, it's only 1.5 mm roughly. So the way to fix that for me will be to take 1.5 mm off this face, but I don't want to do that at this stage. I'm just going to persist with this one, and if the blade guide is out of position with this one, then I can, if it's too far out to account for the amount of adjustment in the bearings here side to side, then I can actually either modify this one, although that hole does line up, or modify the new one. And you can see on this one, yeah, that hole is lined up there. It is actually already further over, so I've got two options there. I could just take a little bit out of the back here with the Dremel and allow that to sit, allow the extrusion to sit down on there. You can see there where it's just out of position. In fact, that might be the best bet. The width of that, yeah, that might actually be the best bet. So I need to probably do that, just so I can basically use this blade, this one, because I'd prefer to use the more recent one, and I think it sets the blade guide in a better position. You can, I'm wondering whether we can put something in there. Yes, we can, the ruler. So if the blade guide's in there, I get basically, well, it's very difficult to measure because I think that's a lip starting to curve up, but basically, you know, that's not passing through with this particular one. If I try the other one, I think that is going to pass through. Yes, okay, so this one actually may set the blade guide too far out. When I do that, that hole there is actually offset, so this one's the one I would have to modify this flat face here just to move it over. That's interesting. So what I might do is persist. I think that hole lines up better, although it is a little bit different. I think I might just take that little section out there with the Dremel, just a millimetre or off there, and I don't know that hole fully lines up. I think you can see that there when I hold that in position. So in fact, I've probably got that distance to cover. Maybe I should take it off here. So decisions to make. Alright, so the modifications now to the extrusion that holds the blade guides, that we need to make clearance for the guides to actually slot forward. The other guides and the new machines of this type have this cut out, so that width continues straight up to here. To do that, we'll probably just scratch a line, or maybe even, yeah, I think that's going to work. Maybe a pencil's going to work better. This is an awl that I actually made. It's not finished. I haven't finished the machining in this section. I've got a brass pipe end that I'll use to fit onto there, and it's got a 10mm hole. This is a masonry bit with the end chopped off, and then just the carbide end chopped off, and then just turned into a point. And you can see the connector there for the style of plug-in type masonry bit. I think that was $4 on the internet, and I had a piece of Tasmanian blackwood left over, which I turned up on the mini lathe that I built a little while ago. But I actually turned up with the wood probably in the wrong orientation, so there's cross grain here, but look, it's very comfortable, and the reason why this comes through is so that we can hit it on the head. So it can be struck with a hammer, this particular awl. Very useful tool. So sometimes a pencil is best. So here we go. Just get a simple line marked here. This doesn't need to be too accurate because it'll be made accurate when we file it. So that will need to be cut off somewhere here. In fact, I might make it neat. I don't think the guides are going to come through too close. We might make it a smaller radius there, something like that. But we'll get to that in a minute. So we'll cut that off a little bit short of that and file it down. Similar here. We need to get rid of some of this. Let's get it's not square, but let's get a bit of a line, and then we'll run this line from here forward, making sure to leave a little bit in the corner. I might cut this off camera. I'm just going to use a hacksaw, small hacksaw, and run the cut down. I've thought of putting this in the bandsaw and running it through, and you know, non-ferrous metals are certainly fine on the bandsaws. I would use an old blade if I was going to do that, not the latest and greatest newest blade. In clamping this, I just got to be careful of squeezing that together. I don't want to actually damage this extrusion, so I will probably put a piece of timber in here to fill that gap, just to support that while I'm sawing that, and it'll be easier for me just to cut that out and then file it, and they're pretty simple operations. You don't need to film those for you. Well, as the saying goes, there are many ways to skin a cat, and I think what I'll just do is clamp this down to this bench and cut it here. So with a little clamping block left over from another job, I could put that in there and just clamp that down. I'll get one of the DeWalt clamps out, which has enough reach to go over the bench, just enough. Put that in position here. That looks good. And then I'll just clamp it at the other end, just lightly as well. Change the shape of the casting, of the extrusion, but we're looking good there. And then we'll get a little hacksaw and start cutting. Right, we're set up here for the first cut at least. We'll get the hacksaw in here. I'm not going to cut it exactly perfectly in the first cut. I'll angle that in first, and I'll straighten it up. And now that I've got a ledge to cut on, this shouldn't take too long. But it is a little bit challenging to start this one, and this is a little lesson. So what I'm going to do is I'll file a step for the hacksaw to sit in before I cut down. Just grab the file. It's just a pretty standard file. It looks been used for woodwork. I need to clean it out. I'll just run. Now I'm not pushing it against this face. I'm pushing down. Gentle weight, of course, with the file. Just getting that edge to cut a good enough step that the hacksaw will be able to, the blade will be able to drop into, and give us a start on that cut. So let's put the file down and pick up the hacksaw again and see if this works. I'll just hold that against. Well, that feels a lot easier already. That feels a lot easier already. Okay, I've been watching very closely at the bottom here. I'm not cutting all the way down to the line. I'm staying about 3 or 4 millimeters off the line so that I can actually have a little radius in the corner. I like radiuses in corners, so we'll see if we can do it. If we can't do it, we'll just file it square. It's not a big problem in terms of strength or anything like that. That's the first cut. The second cut, I'm not sure whether I'll do it here. It's a horizontal cut. It's probably a bit more difficult. I'll do it off camera and come back to you in a moment. Okay, here's that first cut that we just made after unclamping. Now we see we didn't exactly follow the line, and I'm okay with that because we can file it down. One thing you can see if you look very closely, in fact this side's easier to see, is the cut drifted a little bit that way, which is perfectly fine because we can file back in. It would be bad if the cut went this way because we can't really easily put material back. So next step is to work out how to clamp and do this cut along here. It's not a difficult cut, just need to work it out. Well, I had a little bit of think about it. I think the least invasive and the least complicated way in terms of clamping is actually to potentially just use the Dremel with the cut-off wheel. So let's have a look at the Dremel. This is a 3000 model. I think they've been superseded, this model, but very useful little tool. Try and keep everything together in its little box. We'll put a cut-off wheel on there. That's already one here. Set up, ready to go. Wonder if that shaft's going to fit in there, or whether I have to replace the collet. No, that's good. Nice. I love this little spanner. Okay, that's the Dremel ready to go. I'll move things away and plug the power in. Okay, let's just do this. I had an initial go, but it was moving, so let's just try it now that I've clamped the other end. Right, I've decided that trying to make a curved cut there should have been done by drilling a hole there first. So it's now going to be a square hole, so I'll just run this up to closer to the line and then cut that piece out, and then we'll file that square. We might even get a tiny radius there, maybe a millimetre or two. See if we can take that out now. It's fairly thin. Just a little filing task to do to clean up those corners. So I think I'll use that clamping technique. Clamp it down again and just file those nice and neatly. One thing I do need to be very conscious of is this is actually my woodworking bench and I'm using metal, so a bit of clean up, making sure I work clean. One thing I do from time to time, particularly after doing a fair bit of metal work, because I can see the occasional bit in the light there, but one thing I do if I'm doing a little filing or something job is I actually come over this with just a sandpaper and a sanding block, and just that often takes the last little pieces of metal out of the grain of the timber. You can also possibly run over it with a damp cloth to get it clean. It's clamped down, ready to go. Bit of rough filing first, and then we'll smooth it out with this one. Let's get into that corner. Right, I think I'm going to be very happy with that. I might just run a sanding block on there just to neatness. But that looks good to me. Here's just some old, very fine sandpaper. Won't cut very much, but it will just give a bit of a polish to that surface. The other modification I think I'll make is I'll take a section out of here. This will allow me, originally I was going to cut the corner off here so that I can actually see the bottom of the blade guides, but I think if I just cut a small section out of here, then I'll be able to actually just see through the gap. So I think I'll primarily take it out of one side. I'll leave a little bit in here just for strength, and just so I can see a little bit more of the cutting through there. A lot of bandsaws actually have the blade guides sitting below, but I think this provides some protection, so that's a good thing. But just when the blade guide's sitting there and you're looking down on it, you just can't see the blade. So I think I'll take a little bit out of that while I've got it here. Okay, I've just done a little bit of a light sand to make that nice and smooth, so I'm very happy with that modification. I'll clean that mess up and get rid of some of that pencil lines, but I used a sanding block there with a bit of fine P240 old paper that I've been lying around. And the next thing I might do, I'll have to think about this first, is just take a little bit out of here so that I have better sight through there. I want the blade guides to be protected. A lot of bandsaws don't have any protection for the blade guides, and but I think it's not a bad idea, seeing as though it's there. But it does obscure the view, and I tend to run the guides higher than possibly should. So I might just do that and take a little bit of a notch out of there, leaving some material on that side. So I'll just think that through. I might draw a line and get out the file and file that in. Just thinking this through, I want to leave a fair bit of material there, and in fact there's already a step there in the way this extrusion is, so I think I might just take it to there, and similarly on the other side, just for neatness. So we'll just open up something in this space here. We might get a round file in there, I might do it with a flat file, but we'll just maybe even an initial cut with the hacksaw, just to get a little bit of visibility into the blade. I think that much is going to make a big difference. Alright, now we need to mark out for this hole, so that's got to go there. If we drill that hole through, so let's have a look. Now this is an M6, so that's about 5mm across, so it's 4mm to the base, so 4mm plus 2.5 is 6.5. So if we measure up 6.5, then we know basically where we are. 6.5. Whoops, that's not a good spot. Just rotate that. 6.5, and then we've got to get the. Let's just mark that this way. 6.5. Then we've got to get the horizontal position, which will be easy if I could just see the top of the hole through here, and we can center that with a pencil mark. That looks pretty good. I think I'm just a little bit over, so let's see how this lines up if I do that. Well, if I do a 6mm hole there, it'll give a little bit of clearance, and that should just center punch this with this quasi punch that I created accidentally. the shaft for another purpose, but it's nice and hard and it works well as a punch on aluminium. Now over to the drill press to get that hole drilled. Drilled that hole, and a little bit of cleanup, and then we can move to fitting this. In fact, all I have to do is put the screw in there, put that bolt in there. I might put a washer on there, just a thought. I don't want to squeeze that too much in there, or I might even put a piece of wood in there, a piece of timber, just to hold that. This actually fills up with dust from the top, so when I reassemble this, I'm just going to put a little bit of tape over the top there, a little bit of probably cloth tape, so it'll stay stuck for a long time. That's not a surface that bears on anything, it just sits in there and fills up with dust. So the other thing we do need to modify is the cover down here. Now that the blade guides are able to sit more snug in here, this cover will now be in the way. So I'm figuring that I will have to cut a fair bit of that out, but I'll leave that rib there because we do need that for opening and closing. So I don't think we'll compromise the strength of it greatly. It slides nice and freely, but it does need to be able to go up and down as the blade guard. It's actually coming down to protect us from the blade that's in there. So we've got a small piece of offcut here. This is actually left over from making this mini workbench. That's, by the way, a shooting board for a plane to run. So I can set up. I haven't actually finished it. There's a block that goes on this end that's got to be removable. But it's been useful very much. You can just pop a block plane on there and just straighten an edge. Very useful. So what I'll do is I'll just measure off a length, maybe that much. This will go into that hole there. So I'll measure off a width. Let's do it this way so we can see it. I need to clean that edge there to take the round off the outside. So we'll cut or file that back, and the width of it is not absolutely critical, but let's see if we can get it to the width of the channel, the groove in the channel. So something around about that much. Could measure it, but we're boat builders today. We don't measure things, we just make them to fit. So that length was about there. So if I've got to take it down just a little bit, I'll do that with the plane, little block plane, probably this one, and then I'll uh, 4.1, that sounds good to me. Alright, let's cut this down those sides. Just using this saw because it's easy. It's handy having a bench with a hole in it because you can set that up through the hole. This is our piece. We're now going to slot that in. That'll fill that hole, and then we'll drill that through. Yeah, it does look like the blade guides are actually not across this way, but the blade actually does run not down the centre, it does run over to this side biased, so I think there's enough adjustment in that. We've got nice and square, we've got reasonably flush, we've got good visibility, and I'm very happy with that, so we should fit it to the bandsaw and see how it goes. Okay, we're up to refitting the bandsaw blade guide assembly. We've just finished mounting that all up, and now this will be refitted. So here are the new blade guides fitted up, looking really good actually. Very happy with the way that's turned out. So we'll give it a test in just a few moments. You can see the new cutout there giving me much clearer line of sight as I'd maybe try to follow a line on a board. But I'm very happy with that. You can see also here that, I'll move closer, that the guides themselves are right over to the very, in this view, the very left of their adjustment. And they can go just a tiny little bit more, but what that actually means is the support block itself is could probably go a little bit further to the left, and this may be where the other support block might be useful. I might experiment with the other one and see whether we can get that on. The newer machines actually have an additional piece of material between this outer wall here, there, and the actual extrusion here. I've noticed that there's some bolts here, and this whole side panel has an extra layer of metal in there, and it must be, you know, 1.5mm steel maybe, and that would actually give a little bit of a spacing across there and give better alignment. But anyway, for the time being, that's actually looking good. Let's see if it works well. Alright, well, let's find some scraps to cut up. Here's some pine, put that way down. Run those blade guides down nice and close. That's the lowest it can go, so I'll bring them up. Look at that, I can still see the blade. I can now see the blade in through the little cutout we produced. So let's try the bandsaw. Well, it eats up this pine very well. Those cuts are very smooth. I'm very happy with that. And that's about as sharp a corner you can turn with a blade this size. It's a 13mm deep blade, almost half an inch. Let's try something a little thicker. Again, it's pine, so I'm not going to be too worried about stressing it at the moment. But I do some resawing with this bandsaw, and I can get 125 or so, maybe a little bit more depth of cut for a resaw. But maybe we'll look at that in another exercise. Well, that's really eating up that pine, so look at that, smooth cuts. This is a new blade. Thought I'd treat it with a new blade. Wow, that's smooth. So very happy with that. So there we go, new blade guides. And in fact, I'm running this after actually doing a bit of a tune-up of another couple of items. So look out for a follow-up video on the 12-inch bandsaw tune-up.